Hi there, I'm Marla. My parents gave me a birthday trip for turning 18, but when I came home, the locks were changed. No goodbye, no warning, just trash bags on the porch, and a letter that said, "You'll figure it out." But that wasn't even the worst part. They told the whole family I chose to leave. While they erased me from their lives, their will, and even their memories, now they want to be in my son's life after pretending I never existed? What kind of family does that? I'm not usually the kind of woman who remembers exact dates, except one. May 11th, 2007. That was the weekend my life split in half. So clean and so cruel, you could draw a straight line through who I was before and who I became after. Back then, I had just turned 18. I was still naive enough to believe my parents loved me in the way parents are supposed to. I thought the world, my world, was solid. Clyde and Lorene Denovan were never affectionate in public, but that weekend they surprised me with a smile. Something warm, rare, almost unsettling. "We got you something special," Mom said, setting down a brown leather envelope on the kitchen counter. "All expenses paid? Sedona, just for the weekend. You deserve it, Marla." I blinked, confused. "You're serious?" "Of course," she said. "You're growing up. This is your time." Dad clapped me on the back like I was a coworker who'd just made quota. "You'll love it up there. Clean air, red rocks, peace and quiet." I should have known something was off by how rehearsed it all sounded, but I didn't want to ruin it. I was too starved for approval. So I packed my overnight bag, charged my Nokia, and hopped on the shuttle they'd already arranged. Sedona was beautiful, silent in that red desert way that made your thoughts echo louder. I hiked Bell Rock, bought a turquoise bracelet at one of those roadside crystal shops, even wrote a postcard I never got around to mailing. When Sunday rolled around, I took the shuttle back. Tired, sunburned, happy. But the second I saw our street, my stomach turned. The cab driver slowed near our house. No, what used to be our house, and I could barely make out the number on the curb. It was our address, all right. But everything else was wrong. No porch chairs, no welcome mat, no curtains. A bright red for sale sign stabbed the lawn like a knife. I paid the driver with shaking fingers and stepped out. "This can't be right," I whispered. The windows were bare. Through the glass I could see nothing. No furniture, no TV, no photos. Just empty floors and echoing shadows. Like the life I knew had evaporated in 72 hours. I fumbled for my house key, heart jackhammering. The metal scraped in the lock but wouldn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. I knocked harder and harder. Nothing. "Mom?" I called out. "Dad?" Still nothing. I turned around and saw Mr. Callahan across the street, leaning on his mailbox like he'd been expecting a show. We locked eyes. He gave me a slight nod but didn't come over, just kept staring like I was a ghost. "Do you know where my parents went?" I asked across the lawn. He shrugged, said something about moving, figured you already knew. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My brain was frozen, my mouth dry. My hands kept opening and closing around the strap of my bag. I sat on the steps and opened the zipper pocket. That's when I found it. An envelope. White. No name. "Just for you," scrawled in Mom's cursive. Too clean, too deliberate. Inside was a note. 7 words, that's all. "Time for you to grow up. You'll manage. No love, Mom. No explanation. No number. No key. Nothing." They were gone. Just like that. At first, I laughed. A dry, pitiful sound that cracked in my throat. This had to be a prank, a test, some twisted way to push me into adulthood. But night fell, and no one showed up. I sat there, hugging my knees, as the streetlights flickered on. My phone was at 12%. I tried Dad's number. Disconnected. Mom's? Straight to voicemail. I only had my bag and a hoodie. So I curled up on the porch, pulling the fabric over my head to block out the streetlight. I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to. Not yet. The cold didn't bother me. Not as much as the silence. Not as much as the realization that they hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me. The sky hadn't even turned blue yet when I stood up, brushing the dirt from my jeans and stretching out legs that hadn't rested, only folded. My arms were sore from hugging myself all night, my neck stiff from resting it against the doorframe like I belonged to no one and nowhere. The street was silent, still asleep. No birds, no traffic. Just that kind of dead quiet that makes you feel like the world forgot to wake up with you. I knocked on Mr. Callahan's door. Twice. No answer. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't have opened the door either for a girl who looked like she'd spent the night surviving her own family. I walked down the street and turned left onto Bicknell Avenue, where the Parkers still had one of those old payphones bolted outside their garage. The receiver smelled like pennies and cigarette ash, but it worked. I didn't know Aunt Berta's number by heart, but I'd written it down once inside my address book, the one my mom said only old ladies use. Guess it came in handy when your parents ghost you. The line rang 4 times, then a click. Hello? It took a second to find my voice. Aunt Berta, it's Marla. Silence, not the soft kind. I'm sorry to call so early, I rushed on, but I need help. I came back yesterday and my house. I swallowed, forcing the words. It's empty. They're gone. They left me. Still nothing. I could hear her breathing. I waited. Let her say something. Anything. Finally, she sighed. Your mom said you knew. Those words hit harder than the cold. I gripped the receiver like it might fall off the wall. Knew what? That they were moving. Clyde told us you were heading off early. Something about a scholarship in Flagstaff or maybe Prescott. I don't remember exactly. I felt my throat tighten. I never applied for anything out of town. I was supposed to start community college here. Well, she said, a little sharper now, they said you were ready to be on your own. Ready? I laughed, a sound too close to sobbing. I had one bag and a bus ticket. No apartment, no key, no notice, just nothing. Berta went quiet again, then said, Look, I don't know what their deal is. I just assumed you were doing what kids do now, leaving early, wanting freedom. I was 18, I said, voice cracking. Yesterday. That landed. There was a long pause before she added, If you want to come here for a bit, I guess that's fine. I nodded even though she couldn't see it. Thank you. I don't know where else to... She cut me off. Just don't make it permanent, okay? We don't have space for long-term arrangements. And just like that, the hollow in my chest grew wider. But I said, okay, just a few nights. I took the city bus. Flagstaff wasn't huge, but the ride felt endless. I sat by the window, clutching my overnight bag like it was still filled with promises. Aunt Berta lived on the east side, near the dry cleaners where she worked part-time. She opened the door in a bathrobe and curlers, her face lined not just from age, but from someone who'd stopped pretending to care too many years ago. You can use the guest room, she said, stepping aside. No smoking, no loud music, and don't expect rides. The room smelled like dust and mothballs. The sheets were stiff. I didn't care. I showered, ate a piece of toast, tried to sleep, but I couldn't stop hearing her voice on the phone. They said you knew. They lied. Again, and people believed them. Later that afternoon, I walked past the kitchen and overheard Berta on her cordless. Yes, she showed up. No, not a word beforehand. I thought you told her. I told her she can stay for now. Lorene, don't worry. I won't encourage her. That last part, it cut clean. I stood in the hallway, every cell in my body tightening. Don't encourage her. Not how is she, not is she okay. Just don't encourage her. Like I was a virus that might spread if not contained. That night, I stared at the ceiling fan as it turned lazily above me. The shadows stretched across the walls like claws reaching backward through time. I remembered being 7, sitting under the kitchen table during one of Mom's book club nights. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I was just coloring. But I heard her. She's fine, Lorene had said. I mean, we prayed for a boy, but what can you do? There was a laugh, not the kind that made you feel safe. Aunt Kay had responded, Well, she's quiet. Maybe that's a blessing. Even at 7, I knew what that meant. I remembered Christmas that same year. Leo, my cousin, got a new bike and a full drum set. I got socks and a puzzle missing 2 pieces. They said it was because he had potential. I was sweet, like that was enough. Now I could see it for what it was. I'd been unwanted since the beginning. Not for something I did, but for what I wasn't. And the truth sat with me like a weight I couldn't shake. The next morning, I asked Aunt Berta if she'd heard anything else from Lorene. She didn't even look up from her coffee. She said don't call her. Said you'd figure it out. I nodded. Quiet, mechanical, but inside something hardened. They didn't just leave, they erased me, and the people around them helped paint me invisible. That night, staring at the ceiling, I stopped thinking of them as my parents. A week after I stopped calling them my parents, Aunt Berta slid a folded paper across the table during breakfast. Her nail tapped it once, then she returned to her bowl of oatmeal like it wasn't a grenade. It was a job listing, a dishwasher position in Tempe, part-time, cash tips. Folded inside was a one-way bus ticket. No note, no explanation. That morning, she didn't say, "You have to leave." She didn't have to. I got the message. I left the next day without a goodbye. Tempe was a different world. Louder, warmer, and full of strangers who didn't care where I'd come from or where I was going. I stayed on a couch in a dingy apartment near the ASU campus with a girl I used to know in high school, Shira. She smoked cloves and talked about transferring to a better school in California. Her boyfriend slept over most nights and clearly hated that I was there. After a week, she stopped answering my texts. After 2, I was sleeping in the break room of the diner where I washed dishes 6 nights a week. It was the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and regret. Old vinyl booths, broken jukebox in the corner, fry cook named Larry who called everyone champ. The manager let me stay on a cot in the back for a few days, until corporate found out and said it was a liability issue. Then I moved to the back seat of my car. It wasn't a glamorous breakdown. There was no montage music or cathartic sobbing into the windshield, just exhaustion, just trash bags with my clothes in them, a pair of fast food shoes under the seat, and a scratchy blanket that barely covered my legs. Some nights I parked at the Walmart off McClintock. It was open 24/7, and I could slip in, pretend I was shopping, splash cold water on my face in the bathroom. I used to count the number of hours I hadn't spoken to anyone. I stopped after I hit 3 days. One Tuesday, after my shift, I went to the local aid center. A social worker named Diane, late 40s, tight curly hair and glasses with a leopard print frame, sat me down and said, "Let's go over what you're eligible for." She clicked through a screen. "Parents' income?" "None," I said flatly. They cut me off. "Are you listed on any life insurance plans or college savings?" "I don't know." She looked up. "We can check." I gave her my info. She tapped, typed, waited. Then her eyes narrowed. "Huh, your father, Clyde Ashbourne, right?" I nodded. He had a policy through his employer. You were listed until 3 months before your 18th birthday. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Your name was removed. No contingent beneficiary listed after. The file was finalized right before he changed jobs." I swallowed. "So they scrubbed me out." She didn't respond right away, just nodded, slowly. "You're not listed on anything else," she added softly. "Not college accounts, not trust funds, not even emergency contacts." That night, I sat in my car under a flickering streetlight. The blanket I'd bought for $3 at Goodwill was wrapped around my knees. I had exactly $27 in tips folded in my pocket. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. No one was coming. No one was fighting for me. No one even had to lie about why I wasn't around anymore, because no one was asking. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd erased the paper trail, scrubbed me clean like I'd never existed. And I realized, maybe that was always the point. I remembered Mom, Laureen, telling people I was low maintenance. Translation, I didn't ask for anything. I stayed out of the way. I didn't need much. She'd used that as a compliment. Now I saw it as a warning. They knew I wouldn't fight back. They counted on it. I pressed my hand against the window. The glass was cold. I didn't cry. I'd learned not to waste water on people who pretended I was invisible. But I made a decision. If I survived this, if I ever got out of that parking lot, out of those damn dish gloves, out of that car that smelled like grease and spilled Coke and loneliness, I wasn't just going to live. I was going to make a life so big, so undeniable, they'd have to squint to pretend I never existed. They could keep their legacy. I was going to build mine. Trent was feeding Milo mashed banana when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't rush to check it. That kind of vibration, short, sharp, usually meant a spam message or some promotional thing I hadn't unsubscribed from. But something in the pit of my stomach tugged. And when I saw the sender, I froze. Hi, sweetheart. How have you been all these years? No name, just a number I didn't recognize. But I knew that voice, even in text. It had rhythm, like someone used to being heard, not questioned. Lorene. I sat down at the table, my heart suddenly too loud in my chest. 16 years. Not a word. No calls. No apology. And now, this? I stared at the message so long the screen dimmed. When I tapped it back to life, another message had arrived. We'd love to meet our grandson. My hands clenched. I looked at Milo, his cheeks sticky with fruit, and my body turned to stone. Then a third. Don't keep him from his family. That's not fair to him. Fair? I almost laughed. Trent noticed my face and tilted his head. You okay? I handed him the phone. He read, then looked up with the same face he uses when the dishwasher breaks. Calm, but calculating. She wants access, not a relationship. Don't let her in. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. My fingers were shaking too badly. I stepped outside, walked barefoot onto the porch, and sat down on the swing Trent had built last spring. The wind carried the scent of lemon blossoms. It should have been calming. Instead, I felt like I'd swallowed fire. They didn't say sorry, didn't acknowledge the years they carved out of me like I was a rot they had to cut off, didn't ask what I'd been through, didn't ask if I was okay, just demanded, like it was owed. I typed one sentence back. You had 18 years to act like parents. You gave that up the day you disappeared. Then I blocked the number. It felt final, but it wasn't. Because 2 days later, Trent got a call from his mom in Mesa. Clyde was asking about you, she said. Said he was hoping to reconnect. Trent narrowed his eyes at me when he hung up. You think Berta gave them your number? I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since Milo was born. She hadn't reached out, hadn't sent a card, hadn't even liked a baby photo on Facebook. But somehow, they'd found me. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. Marla, she said, a little too chipper. Wow, it's been forever. I need to ask you something. Did you give my number to Lorene? Silence. I don't think so. No, I don't think I ever had your new number, did I? I didn't believe her. It was the same tone she'd used when I was 9 and asked if she was the one who told Lorene I'd broken the planter on the porch. The same hesitating, dodging way she answered when she had known, and just didn't want to be responsible for what came next. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just said, if you didn't, then someone did, and they've already started pushing. Another long pause. They're your family, Marla. No, I said, voice calm but razor-edged. They used to be. That night, while Trent was folding laundry and Milo was fast asleep, I sat in our bedroom with the lights low and scrolled through old voicemails. None from them, of course. But hearing other people's voices, my co-workers, my friend Ellen, the pediatric nurse, reminded me of something important. This life I built didn't have their fingerprints on it. It was mine. They didn't get to show up now, waving the grandparents' card like it earned them entry. Still, my chest stayed tight the rest of the evening. A low hum of panic under my ribs, like I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. It came the next morning. Different number. Same entitlement. The message was short. The courts recognize grandparents' rights. You don't want to do this the hard way. No hello, no name. Just a warning dressed up like a favor. I showed it to Trent. He set his coffee down slowly. Well, he said, his voice steady. Guess we're going to find out how far they're willing to push. I nodded, but deep down, I already knew. 3 days passed before the next message came in. This time, it didn't come with guilt or fake sweetness. It came with a signature. If you don't let us see our grandson, we'll take legal steps. You have been warned. Preston Gill, attorney at law. My throat tightened. Trent was upstairs bathing Milo, and I sat on the edge of the couch rereading it like it might disappear if I blinked long enough. But it didn't. Instead, the words only grew bolder, like they'd been waiting, lurking, ready to strike once they thought I was too tired to fight. They were suing me for grandparental visitation rights. I looked up the name, Preston Gill, found his website in 5 seconds, big smile, red tie, testimonials that read like threats. He got me my rights when my daughter cut me off from my grandson, and no parent has the right to erase blood ties. He wasn't just any lawyer, He was their weapon. I felt the heat rise under my skin. Not panic this time, just fury. They weren't trying to rebuild. They were trying to bulldoze. When Trent came downstairs, towel drying Milo's hair, I handed him the phone. He read the message in silence, then handed it back with a single sentence. So they've gone there. I nodded. It's not just texts now. He sat beside me and pulled Milo into his lap. Then we do it right. We don't panic. We build our case. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't help the tremor in my voice. What if the court sides with them? They won't, he said firmly. They abandoned you. You've got everything documented. This isn't a gray area. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Janine, his mom. She picked up immediately. Marla, I was just about to call you, she said. I think you should hear this. She forwarded me a voicemail she'd received from Lorene 2 nights ago. It was staticky, but clear enough. She's forcing our hand. Lorene's voice crackled through the recording. If she won't open the door, we'll force it through court. Clyde's got a lawyer. He knows what he's doing. We're not just going to sit back and be erased. I stared at the wall. It wasn't even about Milo. It was about control. Pride. They didn't want connection. They wanted power. So I called a lawyer, Greta Vaughn. I'd met her years ago at a parenting seminar through work, and I remembered she specialized in family rights cases. Her assistant picked up on the second ring and scheduled me for a consult the next day. The office was tucked inside a brown brick complex off Speedway. No frills, no polished marble, just a calm, measured space that smelled faintly of old books and eucalyptus. Greta had a warmth to her, calm eyes, gray streaks in her ponytail, and a tone that felt like both comfort and warning. She let me talk. I told her everything. The house, the trip, the erasure, the years of silence, the sudden return. She didn't interrupt, just took notes, asked for screenshots, voicemails, any documented timeline. When I finished, she sat back and folded her hands. You have a solid case, she said. Arizona law allows grandparents to request visitation, but only in certain conditions, and they've never even met your son. They're saying I'm keeping him from his blood family. She raised an eyebrow. You're his real family. They lost that right when they walked away from you. I nodded. They won't stop. They don't see this as wrong. They think I'm punishing them. Greta leaned forward. This isn't about punishment, it's about protection. That night, Trent and I sat at the kitchen table while Milo slept upstairs, his baby monitor purring softly beside us. I handed over the court summons I'd received earlier that afternoon. Trent read it, jaw tense. I didn't cry, I didn't fall apart. Instead, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. He looked at me. What are you doing? I'm drafting the statement I'll read in court, I said. Already? If they want to fight, I said, they'll get one. He nodded once and got up to make coffee. I sat there, the hum of the fridge the only sound around me. They thought they could scare me into submission. They forgot who they were dealing with. The next morning started with a knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent. Just 3 soft raps that somehow felt more threatening than a battering ram. Trent opened it while I fed Milo in the high chair. A man in a pressed gray suit handed over a manila envelope and walked away without a word. Trent closed the door slowly and handed it to me. It was real. Inside was the official notice, a formal petition from Clyde and Lorene Ashbourne, filed through Preston Gill, requesting court-ordered visitation rights with our son. They weren't bluffing. Greta had warned me the day before that it could come to this. People like them, she'd said. Don't back down when they're not in control. They escalate. I called her as soon as I read the papers. We met that afternoon in her office again, the same brown-bricked spot off Speedway, where the air always smelled like lavender oil and caffeine. Her brow furrowed as she flipped through the documents. This is textbook Gill, she muttered. Emotionally framed, legally vague, just enough implication to rattle you, but not enough substance to win. She tapped her pen on the desk. We'll bury it in facts. That's when she opened a file her assistant had pulled together the night before, one I hadn't even asked for. Take a look at this. It was a civil lawsuit from 2006. Clyde Ashbourne, my father, had been sued by his employer for misappropriating company funds. A quiet case, settled quickly, but not before he'd liquidated assets to avoid criminal charges. The house, the one they told me they sold because it was time I stood on my own, had been part of that liquidation. It hadn't been about growth, it had been about running. He got off easy, Greta said, because he paid it back fast, but he did it by selling everything. I felt my stomach twist. All that guilt they'd fed me for being too soft, too ungrateful, all while they were hiding their own disgrace under a coat of parental tough love. That's what the trip was, I said quietly. A smokescreen. She nodded. They sent you away so they could make their escape without facing you. I leaned back, eyes burning. And now they want to act like I'm the one stealing family? We got to work. Every message, every voicemail, every forgotten birthday, every email Lorene had sent Janine that dripped with control and passive aggression. Greta logged and time-stamped everything. Her assistant created folders labeled Abandonment Timeline, Recorded Harassment, Financial Motivation. Janine even forwarded one final voicemail she'd received just 2 days ago. She doesn't get to decide what kind of family she has. That's our job. I played that one 3 times. Let it sear into memory like a scar. That was the nail in the coffin, and Greta knew it. They'll say they just want a relationship with Milo, she said. But this proves it's about domination, not love. It was nearly 6 p.m. when I got home. Trent had dinner ready, something simple, comforting, roasted chicken and rice, and a side of roasted broccoli Milo smeared across the tray more than he ate. I didn't say much at first, just watched them. Father and son. Real family. Not the kind written in legalese or fabricated for courtrooms. After dinner, I sat down at the dining table again. Same spot, same hum of the fridge in the background. But this time, it wasn't fear guiding my hand. It was fire. Greta filed the counter motion the next morning. Harassment, invasion of privacy, emotional manipulation, violation of parental boundaries. And, what made my stomach knot and unclench all at once, the financial motive behind their original disappearance. The abandonment hadn't just been cruel, it had been calculated. She made sure the court saw it, every last shred of it. That night, as Trent rocked Milo to sleep, I sat outside on the back steps, the Arizona air warm on my skin, cicadas humming in the trees. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. This wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about proving they never deserved to call themselves my parents. The morning of the hearing, I woke before the sun. I didn't bother with makeup, just tied my hair back in a low bun, slipped into a black blazer that still had the dry cleaner tag on it, and buttoned my shirt to the top. I needed to look like someone who had nothing to hide. Because I didn't. Trent poured me coffee without a word. Milo was still asleep upstairs. For a brief moment, I let myself watch him, our son, breathing peacefully in the baby monitor's tiny screen, the child they once discarded me for daring to have without their blessing. By 8:45, we were parked outside the Pima County Family Court. The building was glass and concrete, modern, cold. Greta met us on the steps, folder in hand, lips pressed tight. She didn't offer small talk, just nodded, held the door, and we walked in. Security, sign in, waiting room. When they called our case, I felt my legs move before my mind caught up. Inside the courtroom, they were already seated. Clyde wore a navy sport coat. Lorene was in pale pink, like she thought soft colors would undo years of silence. Their lawyer, Preston Gill, had silver hair and a slick voice. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Lorene gave me a small wave, tentative, like we were running into each other at a grocery store and not about to fight over my child in front of a judge. I didn't wave back. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, called us to order. Preston went first. He talked about aging grandparents and the tragedy of estrangement, about a daughter who misunderstood boundaries and missed opportunities for healing. He even pulled out a baby photo of Milo that had been scraped from a Facebook post I made years ago before I went private. She has weaponized distance, he said, and now seeks to punish her parents for the difficult choices they made during her adolescence. He framed my abandonment like a mutual divorce, and for a moment I watched the judge tilt her head, scribble notes, and my stomach turned. Then Greta stood. She didn't raise her voice. She just pressed play. Lorene's voice filled the courtroom. She doesn't get to decide what kind of family she has. That's our job. A murmur rippled through the room. Even the bailiff looked sideways. Greta turned to the judge. This is not about love. This is control masquerading as concern. Then came the paper trail. Text messages, screenshots, court filings, the lawsuit against Clyde, the financial motive, the timeline, and finally, the voicemails, the threats, the gaslighting. Lorene's face cracked. Clyde looked down at the table, hands folded tight. Then the moment we didn't expect. Under cross-examination, Greta asked Lorene, "Why now, after nearly 2 decades?" Lorene hesitated. We wanted to reconnect, for the child's sake." Greta, "The child's or the family names?" Lorene blinked. "We always hoped the baby would be a boy, someone who could carry the Ashbourne name." The silence that followed felt like the world had hit pause. Greta stepped forward. "So you weren't seeking a relationship, you were seeking a legacy." Preston looked like he might choke. I felt nothing. Not anger, not victory, just a strange, hollow kind of relief. The judge turned to me. "Miss Ashbourne, would you like to speak?" I stood. "I became who I am despite them," I said. "Not because of them." I looked at Clyde, then at Lorene. "I am a mother, a wife, a woman who built a life from the ashes they left behind. This isn't about denying them love. It's about protecting my son from the very pain they once handed me like it was a gift." The judge said she would deliver a written decision in the next 10 days. But no one in that room needed to read it to know the truth. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the desert heat hit my skin like a second breath. And I knew one thing. Their version of me just died, and I wasn't bringing it back. A week after court, the official letter arrived by certified mail. The judge denied their petition. No visitation, no mediation, no second chances. I read it once, then again. It felt anticlimactic, like slamming a door I already knew was locked. Still, a wave of release hit me. I didn't smile, but I exhaled in a way I hadn't in years. Trent read over my shoulder. "So that's it? Legally? Yeah." But it wasn't over. Not really. Because the following Saturday, I got a call from a number I hadn't saved in over a decade. Talia, a distant cousin. More of a name at holiday dinners than a presence in my life. We'd played Barbies once when we were 6. That was the extent of our bond. I hesitated before picking up, but something told me to answer. "Hey," she said. "Weird question. Did you hear what happened at the family thing last night?" "What family thing?" "The reunion, in Phoenix. Aunt Jan threw one of her potluck nightmares again." I almost laughed. Of course no one invited me. Talia didn't wait for me to catch up. "So, Clyde and Lorene were there." I tensed. "I thought they'd gone underground." "They came out swinging," she said. "Literally." "What?" she sighed. "They were going on about Milo, loudly, telling everyone what a blessing he was and how they were finally proud to have a real legacy." You know, classic delusional nonsense. My stomach turned. "And then Aunt Margot, yeah, the one with the new granddaughter, she made some joke about how at least her grandbaby didn't come with a lawsuit." I snorted. Couldn't help it. That's when it exploded. Lorene slapped her. Swear to God, right across the face. While Margot was holding the baby. Jesus. Clyde tried to break it up. Ended up shoving Uncle Ron into a folding table. The police showed up. Ron's pressing charges. I didn't know what to say. Talia filled the silence. "I'm calling you because I think you need to know something." Her voice shifted, lower, uneasy. "You know all that we want a relationship crap they fed the court?" "Yeah. It was never about Milo. Not really. Not emotionally, anyway. They just wanted to beat Margot because her kid had a girl and you had a boy." I blinked. "Come again?" "They wanted to parade a male grandchild around before she could. Lorene even said it, loud enough for half the family to hear. Finally, a real Ashbourne, one that matters. Like the others didn't count." I stared out the window. "And get this," Talia added. "They said it while trying to get a photo printed of Milo to hang next to the old family portraits, like they were rewriting history." My chest was tight again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was rage. Not hot, impulsive rage, cold, structured, historical. They're not going to stop, I said quietly. Talia sighed. Well, they may have just stopped themselves. No one's talking to them now. Aunt Margot's threatening to sue. Uncle Ron's posting the arrest record in the family group chat. They're done. I didn't speak. You okay? She asked. I'm fine, I said. Thanks for the call. I hung up. For a long moment I just stood there. Then I walked into the nursery and picked up Milo. He was babbling, grabbing at my sleeve. He looked up at me and grinned, and just like that, I was grounded again. That night the footage leaked. Someone had filmed the reunion fight. Not the slap, but the aftermath. Lorene yelling, Clyde shoving, a baby screaming, paper plates flying. It made its way through the extended family. Texts started pouring in, from cousins, old neighbors, even my ex-classmate Dana who'd moved to Seattle. Did you see what happened with your parents? You were right all along. Can't believe they had the nerve. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I logged off, because I didn't need their downfall. I didn't need applause. I just needed silence. Greta texted me that same night. Now everyone sees what you've lived through. That matters. But the truth was, I didn't want it to matter to everyone. I wanted it to matter to Milo. Someday. When he asked about my side of the story. And when he did, I'd have more than enough to tell him. Not the drama, not the court. But the fact that I stood my ground when it counted. That I built something better. And that I never let people who abandoned me rewrite what I stood for. As for Clyde and Lorene, they finally lost everything they tried to steal from me, and I didn't even have to raise my voice. It had been 6 months since the courtroom. 6 months since I last heard their names spoken out loud in my home. Since I stood across from 2 people who once called me daughter and watched them unravel under the weight of their own lies. 6 months since I realized that closure isn't always a moment. Sometimes, it's a process that unfolds quietly, like dust settling after a storm. We moved, not out of fear, not to hide, but to breathe. Trent's parents had always talked about Ireland. His mom, Maeve, was born just outside Cork. After everything, when she offered to retire early and help us start over across the Atlantic, we said yes. The change of scenery wasn't magic, but it was something close to peace. Our little house sat on a hill outside the city, green for miles, a sky that looked bigger somehow. Milo's laughter bounced off the stone walls and out across the yard like wind chimes. He started saying words. Mama. Ball. And one day, clear as glass, home. That one made me stop what I was doing, folding laundry in the kitchen, and turn toward him like he'd handed me a gift I didn't know I'd been waiting for. We were building something real, something that didn't require apologies or permission. Clyde and Lorene hadn't reached out since the court denied visitation. No letters, no texts, no lawyers, not even a fake apology through a third party. Just silence. Talia sent me an email once, a forwarded message from a cousin I barely remembered. Apparently, Lorene and Clyde were fined after the reunion brawl. Nothing criminal stuck, but the family blacklist had. Weddings? Not invited. Birthdays? Ignored. Holiday cards? Returned to sender. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like consequence. I didn't celebrate, there was no party, no champagne on the counter or smug posts online. I just made dinner, washed dishes, bathed my son. And one night, while Trent read to Milo, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to mail, just to say what needed saying, without needing a reply. You didn't raise me, you erased me, but I still made it. You thought your absence would crush me, that it would swallow me whole, but it fed me something else entirely, clarity. You can't break what you never bothered to build. I folded it in half, then again, and slid it into the fireplace. Watched the paper curl in the heat. Watched the ink fade into ash. I didn't burn it to forget. I burned it because I remembered. There was something final in that moment. Not angry, not triumphant. Just done. And with it, something in me finally settled. That weekend, we took Milo into town to visit the Saturday market. He held my hand while Trent pushed the stroller. I watched him toddle beside me, wide-eyed at the street musicians and the scent of fresh bread. People nodded to us, smiled. They didn't know my story, didn't need to. Because here I wasn't the girl whose parents disappeared. I wasn't the lawsuit, the legacy, the scandal. I was just a mother, a woman with grocery bags in one hand and her son's fingers in the other. And when we walked home, past rows of blooming hydrangeas and stone fences weathered by time, I felt something I hadn't known how to name until then. Safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because I'd stopped waiting for it. It hit me when I passed the bakery window, catching our reflection in the glass, me, Trent, and Milo. That's the picture they'll never see, and that's okay. They don't get to see this version of me. The version that grew roots in foreign soil, the version that loves without needing permission, the version that healed without their help. They'll never meet Milo. And that's not a punishment, it's protection. Because this life, it's sacred. Built from the wreckage they left behind, yes, but not defined by it. As we turned onto our lane, I glanced down at my son. He looked up at me with chocolate on his chin and trust in his eyes. And I knew. I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. Some wounds leave scars. But scars remind us that healing wasn't just possible. It happened. Sometimes people ask me how I found the strength to keep going. The truth is, I didn't always feel strong. I just refused to let someone else's choices define the rest of my life. Pain isn't a destination, it's a passage. And what you build after that, that's where your story really begins. If you've ever been discarded by the people who were supposed to love you most, I want you to know, you're not broken, you're becoming. Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up, it's who stays, it's who sees you for who you really are, and doesn't walk away when it gets hard. So if you're standing in your own storm right now, I hope this story reminds you, your worth isn't up for negotiation. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who should have protected you? Drop a comment below and tell me your story, or just leave a if this hit home. And if you didn't love this story, I still want to know, what didn't land for you? Where are you watching from? And hey, if this video moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice about what family really means, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Because out here, we tell the hard truths, and we heal together. See you in the next one. Hello there, I'm Aileen. At my sister's wedding, she handed me a worn-out dress and said, "It suits you better." I smiled, but I left. What followed wasn't just embarrassment. It was a lifetime of being quietly erased. They replaced me in the family photos, took my name off the ceremony list, gave away my role. And when I finally stood up for myself, my mother said I was never family to begin with. It wasn't just one wedding. It was every moment before and after where I was told, without words, that I didn't belong. I stepped out of the Uber, heels clicking against the sun-baked stone driveway of the Whitmore estate. The humidity hugged me tight, Charleston air thick with the perfume of roses and old money. I took in the scene, white canopies, perfectly lined champagne flutes, and the murmur of Southern charm. Everyone looked like they'd been rehearsing their smiles for weeks. I was the only one dragging her own suitcase through the main entrance like a late check-in. No one turned to greet me. No one rushed over. Just a wedding planner with bleached teeth and a clipboard who glanced at me over her sunglasses and said, "Ah, Miss Aileen, right? You're in one of the garden rooms. It's, simple but cozy." Her smile was tight, practiced, like the kind you give a customer who's about to leave a bad Yelp review. I gave her a nod, walked past two groomsmen adjusting their collars in the mirror, and headed toward my assigned suite. The inside of the room was what I'd call Southern antique chic, if I were feeling generous. Cream curtains, pale blue bedding, and an overpowering lavender potpourri scent that clung to my throat. Jolene had always known how to make me feel like a tourist in my own family. I'd barely unpacked when I got the text, "Come to the Oak Room, I have something for you, Jay." That emoji alone told me this wasn't kindness. When I entered, she was already surrounded by her bridal crew, 6 women in matching silk robes, sipping mimosas and laughing like life was a rom-com, and they were the stars. She spotted me and waved like I was a distant acquaintance, not her sister. "Oh, good, you came," she said brightly. "I have something special for you." She handed me a long, narrow garment box. It looked like it had been stored under someone's bed for years. I opened it. Satin, Pale gold, with visible creases and faint discoloration around the underarms. The kind of thing you'd find on a discount rack at a thrift store and wonder who died in it. "It suits you better," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes were knives. One of the bridesmaids snorted behind her mimosa. "It's got that vintage vibe," she whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "Very nostalgic." Another chimed in, "Honestly, it's got character, just like Aileen, timeless." And then came the laughter, sharp, rehearsed, layered with sugar and venom. I smiled politely, because I'd been taught not to cause a scene, because if I said what I really wanted to say, it would have ruined the mood. And ruining Jolene's mood was a cardinal sin in this family. I ran my hand over the fabric. It had been altered. Poorly. The seams puckered at the waist, the hem uneven. Not only was it second-hand, it had been tampered with. My size wasn't even that different from Jolene's, but this thing had clearly been cinched and stitched to fit someone else's idea of what I should look like. "You know," Jolene said, turning to the group like she was hosting a talk show, "this used to be one of my favorites back when I was, 20? It's got history." Then, turning back to me, "I knew you'd appreciate that." She didn't mean the dress, she meant the humiliation. I held it up to the light, inspecting it like a museum piece. "Thank you," I said. "It's definitely memorable." They laughed again. I didn't. I excused myself before I could say something sharp enough to slit open the mood. Back in my room, I hung the dress on the closet door. It looked even worse in direct light, like someone had tried to scrub out stains that wouldn't lift. A metaphor, maybe. This wasn't the first time Jolene had pulled something like this. It was just the first time she'd done it so publicly. Birthdays that passed with nothing more than a text, promotions she never mentioned. Even at Dad's funeral, she'd acted like I was just the person who arranged the chairs. They called me strong, independent, the one who didn't need anything. But really, I was just the one who stopped asking. I stood in front of the mirror and held the dress up to my body. The reflection didn't lie. It didn't fit. It never did. I knew what this was. A warning dressed as a gift. It said, "Stay in your place. Don't try to shine. And if you show up anyway, wear something that proves you don't belong." But here's the thing about growing up invisible. Eventually, you learn how to watch. You learn how to listen for what isn't being said. And right now, what wasn't being said was the truth. That truth? I was done playing along. I smoothed the dress down and smiled. A real smile this time, because they had just handed me a reason to stop pretending. And I'd never been one to waste an opportunity, because I was done pretending. But they were far from done pushing me. By the time the sun dipped behind the oaks and the twinkle lights lit up the outdoor patio, I had ironed the dress, pulled my hair into something passable, and touched up my lip gloss like I belonged. That was my mistake, thinking I still had a role to play in a show I wasn't even cast in. The rehearsal dinner buzzed with energy, plates clinking, champagne flutes rising in toasts that didn't include my name. I waited, expecting someone to tell me where to stand, what to do, as maid of honor. After all, Jolene had named me that 6 months ago in a text full of hearts and fake sentiment. Instead, during the first toast, Jolene wrapped an arm around Holly, her sorority sister with platinum curls and Botox at 30, and said, "This beautiful woman right here is my rock, my soul sister, and my maid of honor." She raised her glass. Everyone followed. My fingers gripped the edge of my wine glass so tight I thought it might crack. She didn't even look at me, didn't offer an explanation, not even a sideways glance. When I finally found a quiet moment with her by the oyster bar, I asked, "When did Holly become your maid of honor?" Jolene popped a shrimp cocktail in her mouth, wiped her fingers daintily, and said, "Oh, last month? Honestly, you've been so busy with your career stuff. I didn't want to stress you out. Holly's here more. She just fits the aesthetic better, you know?" I stared at her. "Fits the aesthetic?" She shrugged. "It's coastal garden glam, Aileen. You're more structured." I laughed. One dry, humorless exhale. "Right, because nothing says glam like betrayal served on a silver platter." Jolene leaned in, eyes sharp. "Don't make this about you." I didn't reply. Because I knew if I said one more word, I'd explode. And if there's one thing my mother warned me about, it was making scenes. Speak of the devil. Not 2 minutes after that exchange, Dolores found me standing alone near the terrace. She looked impeccable, of course. Pearl earrings, that wine-colored wrap dress she only wore to impressive events. She touched my elbow like she always did when she was about to say something manipulative wrapped in concern. "Sweetheart, can I offer a little advice?" she said, already talking before I could answer. "Let this be Jolene's moment. Please, don't make it complicated." I raised an eyebrow. Complicated? She's under a lot of pressure. You know how emotional she gets. And people are watching. This family, we've always held ourselves with grace. I tilted my head. Meaning what exactly? She smiled, tight, polished, and empty. Meaning smile even when it hurts. That's what women like us do. I almost choked on the hypocrisy. She hadn't smiled at me since 2009. "And you," she added, "you've always been the calm one, the mature one. That's why I never had to worry about you, unlike Jolene." Right. Because being the forgotten child meant I was the convenient one, the quiet placeholder, the safety net. Dolores looked at my dress. "That's the gown she gave you, huh? It's different." "Yeah," I said. "It screams forgotten attic box." She gave a chuckle that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, you know your sister. Always sentimental. If sentimentality meant cutting someone out and laughing about it behind their back, then sure." I walked away before she could say more. Found a seat at the far edge of the lawn near the fountain, where the string quartet's music was a murmur and not a migraine, and then came the photos. "Family shots!" the photographer called. "Bride side, let's get everyone in!" People started lining up. I stood ready to join when a woman with a camera and headset stopped me. "Oh, sorry, bride side only for this set." I blinked. "I'm her sister." The woman flushed. I was told this was for parents and the bridal party?" Of course she was. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked back to my seat. It wasn't worth it. Not the pictures, not the smile I would have had to fake. Later that night, I scrolled through Jolene's Instagram. Photos from every angle. Laughing, sipping champagne, hugging Holly, posing with Dolores and our dad like a perfect portrait family. I wasn't in a single frame, not even the background. That was the point. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not out of shock, just confirmation. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were writing me out in real time. Eventually, one of the caterers passed by and paused. "You okay, ma'am? Would you like another glass of wine?" I looked up. The garden lights danced in his glasses. "Are you family or guest?" he added, trying to clarify. I smiled. "That depends who you ask." So I stopped looking for my name. I knew it wouldn't be there. Saturday morning brought the rehearsal brunch. I arrived a little early. Habit, I guess. Even when they make you feel like a shadow, you show up on time. The ballroom was already buzzing, music humming low, plates being set with silver trim and calligraphed place cards. Everything screamed perfection, right down to the custom napkins embossed with Jolene and Reuben. I made my way toward the seating chart pinned to a massive gold frame near the entrance. Guests crowded around it, laughing, pointing at their names. I stood there longer than I should have, scanning every row. Tables 1 through 13, names printed neatly in navy ink, all visible, all accounted for. Mine wasn't there. I squinted, checked again. My last name, my first. Any variation. Nothing. A woman with a headset approached, holding a clipboard. "Miss Aileen? I believe you're at table 14. It's just over by the side exit, past the buffet station." I followed her finger. I hadn't missed it. Table 14 wasn't even listed. She added with a half-hearted smile. "It's more private, intimate. Better for catching your breath, you know?" "Sure. Or for being out of sight." I didn't respond. I walked slowly, passing through clusters of people greeting each other like long-lost friends. I made my way past the wine cart, the dessert display, and finally found it. Table 14. A two-top, jammed near the fire exit, directly beside a stack of folded chairs, and a door propped open with a sandbag. The place card read Aileen in hurried ink. No floral print, no gold foil. Just a name scribbled as an afterthought. I stared at it for a long time. The laughter from the main tables echoed like a taunt. I could see Jolene at the center, gesturing wildly as she told some dramatic story, no doubt about how she once saved a bird or broke a heel. The crowd leaned in, captivated. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was resigned. As I turned to leave the table, I passed a display of framed photos set on easels. Wedding photos of our parents, a baby photo of Jolene, a graduation shot, her in white cap and gown, Dolores clutching her like she'd birthed royalty. But there was no photo of me. Not from high school, not college, not Christmases, not a single one. They didn't just forget. I'd been edited out. A large canvas print hung near the dance floor, Jolene and Dolores at Jolene's high school graduation. I remember being there. I took the damn picture. No sign of me in it. I wandered into the restroom, needing space more than anything. Inside, soft music played overhead, lavender soap foamed at the sink, and the air smelled like fake citrus and judgment. 2 bridesmaids entered, talking loud enough to be heard in another state. I swear, did you see the look on her face when she realized she was at the table for leftovers? Right? The other laughed. That dress, though, like something you'd find at a thrift store's clearance bin. I froze in the stall. The first one lowered her voice, but not enough. I mean, she's Jolene's sister, but she gives guest energy, you know? I give her credit, though, the second replied. She's mastered the art of being invisible. They laughed. Water ran. One of them reapplied lip gloss. She should have just RSVP'd no and saved everyone the tension. Or worn something less sad. They left. I stayed. 5 more minutes, maybe 10. Then I flushed the toilet, stepped out, looked at myself in the mirror. And for once, I didn't adjust my hair. Didn't check my lipstick. I just looked. At myself. At the woman they couldn't bother to include, but somehow still feared enough to mock. I walked out of that restroom and back into the reception with no expression. No storming off, no words. I passed my table, looked at the place card again, then picked it up and dropped it in the trash bin beside the catering door. I wasn't going to raise my voice. Not yet. But this? This was the last time they shrank me and expected me to stay small. You don't get to erase me and expect me to stay silent. And it turned out, I wasn't the only one noticing the cracks. Saturday evening, the light had turned honey gold through the ballroom windows, and people moved like clockwork between the lounge, the reception hall, and the outdoor courtyard where the cocktail hour buzzed with energy. I'd stepped away, just for a breather. No real destination, just space. That's when I saw Ruben. He stood alone by the bar, nursing what looked like the same glass of whiskey from earlier. One hand in his pocket, the other tapping the rim of the glass rhythmically, like he was keeping time with a silent thought. He saw me before I could look away. "Aileen," he said, with a nod that wasn't quite casual, but not stiff either. I walked over. I didn't plan to. My legs just moved, maybe because he was the only person in this circus who hadn't looked at me like I was a prop that didn't match the set. "Did Jolene always talk to you that way?" he asked before I could say anything. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He looked down at his drink. The tone, the little digs. I don't know. I used to think it was sibling banter, but lately it feels like something else. There was no accusation in his voice, just confusion, like someone realizing the map they'd been following was wrong all along. "She's always known how to fill a room," I said, careful. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but now I'm wondering who she has to push out of the frame to do it." That line sat between us for a second too long. He didn't wait for an answer, just nodded again and turned back toward the main room. Later, during the walkthrough of the ceremony flow, I noticed it. Ruben wasn't holding her hand when the coordinator walked them through the aisle steps. He stood just behind her, nodding, but distant. When she laughed too loud, he didn't join in. When she tried to pull him into a joke with the groomsmen, he offered a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Dolores noticed. She glanced at them more than once, lips pressed tight. But Inez, his mother, watched everything with the calm calculation of a woman who's lived through worse and always landed on her feet. She wasn't subtle, but she didn't need to be. Her son was slipping away from the grip of this illusion, and she wasn't going to stop it. Jolene didn't seem to notice. She was too busy orchestrating moments for the photographer, adjusting her bouquet angle, practicing her tilt, making sure every strand of hair knew its place. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. I stepped outside for air. That's when I met her, a woman in her mid-30s, sipping a glass of white wine with the kind of relaxed posture that said she wasn't part of this show, just attending it. She offered a kind smile. "You're Jolene's sister, right?" she asked. I nodded, waiting for the punchline. "I thought so. It's strange, though. I've been looking through all the photos and slideshows they've been showing inside. I didn't see you in any of them." Her voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't even suspicious. Just casually confused, the way someone points out that a chair is missing from the table. I offered a tight smile. "Guess I'm just not very photogenic." She tilted her head. "That can't be it." She was gone before I could explain away the discomfort. I leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the field lights flickering on in the distance. There were dozens of people here, dozens of ways Jolene had crafted this image of herself. And yet, even strangers were starting to see through it. That did something to me. It wasn't revenge that crossed my mind. It was clarity. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to shove my way into the spotlight. What I needed was to stop stepping aside. If even Ruben, Mr. "We're just excited to build a future together," was seeing the cracks, maybe this wasn't just in my head. Maybe it never was. And maybe Jolene's version of reality wasn't as airtight as she thought. The best part about the truth? It doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs someone to stop dimming it. And I wasn't going to dim it anymore. I was done being polite. The bridal suite waiting area smelled like hairspray, cheap champagne, and manufactured serenity. The kind of place where fake tears dried quicker than real ones. The wedding was just hours away. Jolene was somewhere down the hall making last-minute demands about floral placement or lighting. I sat in the corner, pretending to scroll through my phone while trying not to exist too loudly. That's when Ellie, Jolene's 10-year-old daughter, ran in, breathless and giggling, her tablet in one hand and Jolene's phone in the other. "Oops! Mommy forgot this," she chirped, dropping the phone on the couch next to me before skipping off. I didn't plan to touch it, but the screen lit up. A new text thread flashed open, one Ellie had clearly been playing around in before the phone locked. The message at the top read, "Gave her the old dress. LOL. Looked pathetic. She still wore it." Underneath it, another one from Jolene herself. "She's so desperate to be included. It's almost sad." My stomach clenched, but my hand stayed steady. I pressed the side button and took a screenshot. Then another. And another. She hadn't just humiliated me. She bragged about it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a campaign. Finally, I had something more than bruised feelings. I had evidence. Before I could process what to do next, Ellie came bounding back into the room. "Aunt Aileen, do you really not have a family?" I turned slowly. "What?" She looked up at me, blinking innocently. "Mom says you're jealous because you don't have a husband or kids or a house. That you're just mad because no one picked you." The words hit harder than they should have, coming from a child. But children don't lie. They repeat. I forced a smile. "That's not something you should worry about, sweetheart." She nodded, not really understanding, and ran off again. I sat there a moment longer, the phone burning in my pocket now. My breath felt shallow, not because of the insult, but because of the clarity. I stood and walked with purpose. Dolores was in the lounge, sipping her lukewarm tea and pretending she didn't see me approach. She looked up, surprised by my expression. "We need to talk," I said. She sighed. "Aileen, not now. This isn't—" I cut her off. "I saw Jolene's texts." That got her attention. Her jaw clenched slightly, but her eyes didn't widen. No guilt, no panic, just calculation. She laughed about that dress, said I looked pathetic, that she gave it to me to embarrass me. Dolores didn't even blink. "You should be grateful she even let you attend." "Let me attend?" I stared at her, stunned. "You've never really been part of this family," she added, voice flat. "Jolene's always been special. You've always been fine. There's a difference." That sentence, so casual, so sharp, sliced right through the years of fake smiles and thankless effort. Never been part of this family. I took a deep breath, then looked her straight in the eye. "You've made your choice. I'm making mine." She opened her mouth to speak, But I didn't let her. If Jolene pushes again, she won't get silence in return. This was your last warning. And I meant it. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't begging, I was done with both. Dolores didn't stop me as I walked out. She didn't call after me, because somewhere deep down she knew the dam had cracked. The daughter she could overlook had found something louder than approval. Conviction. They thought silence was weakness. I was about to teach them it was strategy. And I wasn't wearing gloves anymore. The hallway outside the bridal dressing room had a chill to it. Not from the temperature, Charleston was humid even in spring, but from the mood. You could feel the tension crawling along the walls like static, too thick to ignore. The ceremony was 2 hours away, and everyone moved like glass, fragile, shiny, about to shatter. I was leaning against a narrow window ledge, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, when Inez approached. She didn't smile, just nodded for me to follow her into a quieter alcove. "I've been watching," she began softly. "Longer than you think." I didn't say a word, just tilted my head slightly. I'd learned silence often speaks louder than questions. Inez pulled a thin folder from her purse, the kind that makes a satisfying snap when you open it flat. Inside were printed emails, clearly dated and highlighted, legal correspondence, one from Ruben's attorney, another from Jolene's email. "She was supposed to sign a prenup," Inez said. "It's standard in our family, but she dodged it. Lied, cried, stalled." She pointed to a message time-stamped 3 weeks ago. "I don't think he'll push it. He's too in love. I can distract him if needed." That line punched me harder than I expected. "She never planned to protect him," Inez added. "She planned to use him." I looked up at her. "Why are you telling me this?" She took a deep breath. "Because he won't believe it coming from me, but he might hear it if it comes from you." "And you want me to tell him?" "No," she said, "not unless it falls apart. But if it does, I want you ready." I closed the folder, handed it back. "I'm not here to protect anyone anymore. I'm here to stop pretending." Her eyes didn't soften, but they warmed, just slightly. As I turned to walk away, she asked one last thing. "If today goes bad, will you speak up?" I paused, then nodded. "Loud enough for everyone." Back in the hallway, I barely made it 10 steps before Jolene cornered me, heels clicking like accusations on the marble floor. "Oh, look, the martyr returns," she sneered. "Should I cue the sad violin?" I faced her fully, calm, collected. "No music needed," I replied, "but maybe a mirror." She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. "Still playing perfect?" I asked. "You might want to rehearse what honesty feels like. It's coming for you." She smirked, trying to gather control. "This is why no one ever takes you seriously, Aileen. And yet here you are, cornering me in a hallway, hoping I'll stay quiet." She flinched. "Don't worry," I added. "I won't ruin your big day. The truth will handle that for me." And I walked away. Out in the corridor, a group of bridesmaids were fussing over a torn hem, nervous giggles floating around. I stopped just long enough to be heard. "You might want to check with Ruben," I said loud enough for the entire room. "There's a few surprises coming. This show's almost over." Gasps. One of them dropped her mimosa glass. Another muttered, "What the hell is she talking about?" Jolene's pale face peeked around the corner. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, and that ghost was her own reflection. I didn't need to ruin the wedding. I just had to tell the truth, and let it do the rest. By the time the sun dipped low and turned the sky a rich, theatrical gold, we were already gathering. The open-air venue was every inch the overproduced dream Jolene had promised. Rows of crisp white chairs arranged with military precision along a winding cobblestone path, petals scattered like confetti, a massive floral arch that looked more like a set piece from a period drama than something meant for real people. Everything about the setup screamed curated perfection, the kind of beauty that only exists to be posted, shared, and envied. Just like everything Jolene touched. Guests murmured politely, fanning themselves with the custom-printed programs that doubled as vanity pieces. Most didn't know each other, invited for show, not sentiment. Everyone looked just hot enough to be irritable, just invested enough to pretend. I stood off to the side, deliberately out of frame. Not hidden, just apart. Watching Jolene in her lace and glitter, watching Ruben in his tailored navy suit, standing beneath that ridiculous arch like two porcelain figures at the top of a cake. She held his hand like it was part of her costume, another accessory to match the peonies, the pearls, the pre-approved playlist. When the music began, she gave his fingers a little squeeze, rehearsed and purposeful, like she could choreograph his pulse. A woman conducting a man. But it wasn't her that caught my attention. It was Ruben. That half smile on his face, the way his eyes didn't match it. They weren't dead, just somewhere else. Like he was watching himself from a distance, unsure of how he got here. The officiant cleared his throat and began, his voice smooth and neutral, as if he hadn't officiated 6 other weddings that month. Jolene adjusted her veil slowly, deliberately, like she was waiting for the spotlight to swing her way. And then, just when the fantasy reached its highest, most fragile note, Inez stepped out from the front row. It was quiet at first, a whisper of movement. Some people didn't even notice until they saw the phone in her hand. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice didn't tremble. "But this needs to be heard before anyone says I do." The crowd shifted, the music hiccuped, a collective intake of breath, like the moment before lightning strikes. She tapped the screen. Jolene's voice, unmistakable, rang out from the small speaker. Not a whisper, not a joke. Clear, confident, recorded in full belief she was untouchable. "Ruben's sweet, but he's not exactly hard to manage. Honestly, he's trainable. Like a golden retriever in a tux." Gasps. Not movie gasps, not dramatic ones. Real, uncomfortable sounds of shock. A champagne flute slipped from someone's fingers and shattered against stone. The officiant stopped mid-sentence, blinking. The spell broke. Jolene froze for half a second, then snapped into action. Her mask slipped but didn't shatter. She went for the phone, fast, eyes blazing. "You bitter old witch, you set this up!" But Inez didn't flinch. She just stepped back, serene. "I'm protecting my son. You already set this up. You just forgot who was watching." Ruben stood perfectly still. No emotion on his face at first, just stillness. He looked at Jolene like a man finally seeing the bottom of a well he'd fallen into. Then he spoke, into the mic clipped to his lapel. Quiet, honest. "I'd rather call off a wedding than walk into a lie." The words echoed. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Jolene let out a disbelieving laugh, trying to pull the narrative back. "Seriously? You're believing them over me? They've been against me since day one. This is jealousy. It's sabotage." I stepped forward, not to gloat, just to finish what she started. "No one plotted anything, Jolene. You just couldn't keep the mask on long enough. This isn't sabotage. This is truth, finally breathing." She turned to me, eyes sharp, voice venomous. "You've always hated me." I met her gaze, steady. "No, I stopped letting you write my story." And then Ruben turned, really turned, saw me, not as a pawn or a warning or a half-remembered regret, but as someone real. He stepped back from Jolene. She spun to the crowd, her voice shrill now. "You all know me! You know this isn't who I am! Someone say something!" But the silence was louder than anything she could say. Then Inez moved again, quiet but firm, standing beside her son like a shield made of truth. "I know who my son is, and I know what he deserves." That was the crack. The air seemed to shift. Something invisible but essential snapped. Ruben looked at the officiant. "We're done here." And that was it. He stepped down. Jolene didn't follow. Couldn't. She stood trembling, bouquet limp in her hand, caught between fury and disbelief, between wanting to scream and realizing it was too late. She turned and fled, because that's what it was, not walking out, not reclaiming dignity. It was running. Her heels clipped awkwardly on the stones, makeup streaking, her dream unraveling thread by thread in front of everyone she'd handpicked to witness her triumph. Dolores followed at a distance. No words, just that same cool elegance she'd perfected for decades. But just before disappearing behind the curtained entrance, she looked back at me. No fury, no contempt, just grief, just loss. The kind of heartbreak that happens when you realize too late you bet on the wrong daughter. I didn't move, didn't chase, didn't collapse. I just stood there, breathing. That wasn't vengeance, I thought. That was clarity. The chairs stayed full for a moment longer, people unsure of protocol, unsure if applause or condolences were appropriate. But none of it mattered. The wedding was over. And somewhere deep beneath the ruins of it all, something truer had finally begun. Twilight had crept over Charleston like a secret being kept too long, cloaking the skyline in bruised purples and soft grays. From the window of the private lounge tucked behind the reception hall, I could see the last of the sunlight bleeding behind the low country rooftops. The sheer curtains stirred slightly in the breeze, but nothing else moved. Inside, the air was thick, soaked in everything unsaid, everything undone. It no longer smelled like celebration. It smelled like the aftermath. Grief has a weight to it, and tonight, it had settled over the room, pushing down on everything that had once been upright. I sat on a velvet settee near the tall window, alone, my fingertips slowly circling the rim of a melted candle stuck inside a cut glass holder. Its flame had long since gone out, leaving behind a pool of wax and smoke. Outside, catering staff moved in tired patterns, clearing smeared plates and half-eaten slices of fondant-covered cake from abandoned tables. Somewhere, a champagne flute toppled, landed on its side, and rolled gently to a stop. No one picked it up. An hour ago, this had been a wedding. Now it was a ghost town with fairy lights. There had been no first dance, no bouquet toss, no toasts full of inside jokes and polite laughter, just gasps, phone recordings, accusations, and the sound of 100 whispered exits. One by one, guests had slipped out, eyes wide, mouths tight. The show was over, and no one wanted to be caught in the credits. I hadn't seen Jolene since she'd bolted down the aisle like a cornered animal. I didn't expect to. I figured she was licking her wounds somewhere, rewriting the story in her head already, trying to cast herself as the wronged heroine. Let her. What I didn't expect was Dolores. The door didn't open, it slammed, and then she appeared. My mother. Elegant, imposing, angry in that specific way only she knew how to be. Cold, calculated, and absolutely sure she was in the right. Her heels clicked sharply against the wood floor as she approached, like punctuation marks to a sentence she'd been practicing all night. You couldn't just sit back, could you? Her voice cut through the stillness like a whip. You had to humiliate her in front of everyone. I turned my head slowly, deliberately, met her eyes without flinching. No one made Jolene say those things, Mom. She recorded herself. Dolores's lips thinned. You've always been jealous. That word, jealous, drifted into the room like smoke from a fire I didn't start. I didn't react. Not anymore. She was finally having her moment, she hissed, and you couldn't stand it. I tilted my head, studied her. Not the way a daughter studies a mother, but the way you look at a stranger you once trusted with your secrets. This is who you defend? I asked quietly. After everything? Dolores's jaw tensed. She's your sister. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, she's your favorite project. Your second chance, not mine. Her arms folded across her chest, the defensive posture of someone used to control. You've always thought you were better than us. Just because you left, got your little job, my little job paid for your medical bills last year, I said, my voice flat. Silence, the kind that isn't empty but full, of shame, of unacknowledged truth. She blinked, once, then again, harder, like she could reset the moment. You're not part of this family anymore. Those words weren't new. I'd heard them before, wrapped in passive aggression and holiday arguments, but this time, they didn't land. They didn't stick. I'd finally developed armor. I stood slowly, smoothed the creases of my dress, not because I needed to, but because I could. I took a breath, long and deep, and let it fill the space she'd tried to shrink me into for most of my life. Then stop expecting me to act like I am. Her face shifted, just for a second, a twitch near her eyes, a flicker of something behind the anger, regret maybe, or recognition. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to catch up. I stepped past her, paused at her shoulder, close enough for her to feel the distance between us. You chose your silence, I said. I chose the truth. That's the difference. And then I walked out. Into the courtyard, into air that didn't press down. The garden was quiet now, stripped of guests, but the scent of the hundreds of cut roses Jolene had insisted on still lingered. I passed the fountain she'd demanded be installed for the aesthetic. The water still flowed, steady, oblivious. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Every step I took didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. It felt like I was stepping into myself, unburdened, unmuted, real, like peeling off a skin someone else had sewn around me. This wasn't exile. This wasn't betrayal. This was liberation. This was the beginning of something truer than any bloodline or last name. Because here's the truth. You can only be erased if you keep showing up to be written out. And I was done offering up blank pages. So I stopped asking to be let in and started living like I was already free. It had been exactly 1 week since the wedding that never happened. The Denver skyline welcomed me back like an old friend, quiet, steady, never demanding I perform. I stepped into my apartment, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because sadness no longer controlled the narrative. It was simply part of it. There were no texts from Jolene, no apology, no explanation. Not even a passive-aggressive quote shared to social media like she used to post when she wanted me to feel guilty but couldn't bring herself to speak. Dolores left a voicemail, short, tense. "You went too far, but I guess we all did." I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. That message wasn't for me. It was for herself. A cracked admission she wasn't ready to make fully, and I wasn't about to beg for it. I spent that Monday cleaning. There was a particular kind of therapy in scrubbing out someone else's residue from your space. The worn dress, still wrinkled, still a joke, was folded into a donation bag. I didn't burn it. I didn't even rip it. That would mean it had power. Instead, I let it go like the clutter it was. The wedding fallout had gone quietly viral, not in a scandalous tabloid kind of way, but in wedding forums, planning groups, a few TikToks that blurred faces but didn't spare tone. One video of the moment Ruben called things off was titled, "When the Groom Finally Sees the Truth." The comments were ruthless. She called him trainable? Yikes. Imagine dodging that bullet in a tux. I didn't engage, but I saw. By Wednesday, Jolene had deleted all her wedding posts. Her sponsorship links were broken. A friend of mine who worked for a regional planner sent a quick text. "She's not getting booked again anytime soon. Vendors talk." I typed thanks, but never hit send. It didn't matter. Vindication wasn't a dish to serve warm or cold. It just sat there. Quiet. Factual. That same evening, I sat down with a blank page and wrote a letter I never intended to send. It began, "Mom, I didn't need you to choose me. I just needed you to see me." It ended, "You never did." Then I hit delete. Closure isn't always something you hand to someone else. Sometimes it's a weight you put down silently and leave behind on the sidewalk. That Saturday, I met Vanessa, my old roommate, for brunch. She didn't ask what happened. She just slid me a mimosa and said, "You look like you slept for the first time in months." We laughed, really laughed. When the waiter came over and asked, "Table for one?" I answered without hesitation, "Not anymore." We shared a plate of lemon ricotta pancakes and traded bad date stories like high schoolers. There was no mention of dresses or altars or who said what behind whose back, just now, and next. On the walk home, I didn't check my phone for missed calls. I didn't need to. I wasn't waiting for a reunion. I wasn't writing an ending that included them. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about space, about becoming something whole outside the outline someone else drew for me. Because here's the thing, you don't always get the family you want, but you always have the power to become the person they can't define. They say family is where you're supposed to feel most seen, but what happens when the people who raised you never really looked at you at all? If you've ever been the easy one, the quiet one, or the one who kept swallowing pain just to keep peace, let me tell you something I wish someone told me sooner. Silence doesn't make you strong, and it doesn't make you invisible either. It just delays the moment you finally choose yourself. I didn't walk away from my family to hurt them. I walked away to heal me. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking to belong in places that refuse to recognize your worth. And if you're watching this, maybe you needed to hear that too. Maybe you've been written out of someone's story, but that doesn't mean you can't start writing your own. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Do you believe peace is worth more than approval? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's listening. And if this story didn't resonate with you, tell me why. Everyone's truth deserves to be heard. If you felt this video spoke to your heart, hit that subscribe button and follow the channel, because there are more stories like this coming. Real, raw, and made for you. Until next time, Aileen. Hi there, I'm Imelda. At my sister's wedding, my parents called me up like I was part of a tribute, then tried to shame me into giving her my $840,000 beach house in front of everyone. When I said no, my own father hit me with a glass. That should have been the worst part. But it wasn't. Because the deeper truth, they'd been planning it for months, faking illnesses, stealing documents, forging my name on legal deeds. And when I refused to be silent, they tried to evict me from a house I paid for myself. So I did what they never expected. I sold their home instead. I arrived at the venue in Fort Lauderdale just before sunset. The spring air was heavy with gardenia and smoked cedar, and the lights draped over the courtyard flickered like the whole place had been waiting for someone, just not me. The valet barely glanced at my car, then rushed to greet a BMW behind me. I straightened my dress and headed toward the welcome table. A young man in a sleek black vest scanned a tablet. Name? Imelda Fuhrman. He frowned, scrolled, then turned the screen toward me. There it was, a chart that looked like it had been finalized by a publicist. Under the Reynolds-Kate family block, there was Tamsin and Clyde in bold font, followed by extended relatives. At the bottom, in gray italics, guest of family +1. I'm the sister, I said, his mouth opened slightly. I can make a name tag if... It's fine. I pinned the generic badge over my heart. The adhesive tugged at my dress as if even fabric was resisting my presence. Inside, chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen fire. Jazz played. Guests in designer suits swirled champagne flutes, laughter rising in bubbles I wasn't invited into. I found my seat, table 23, near the service entrance. I wasn't offended, I was prepared. A server passed by and asked, "Are you with catering?" I turned to face her. "No, just invisible." She blinked and moved on. I let my hands rest on the place setting, a drooping napkin folded into a swan that had given up mid-flight. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't neglect, it was design. 3 weeks ago, Mom had called saying she'd had a minor stroke. I flew down, panicked. She acted frail, asked me to help her log into my laptop, just to check Facebook. I'd left the room for 5 minutes. When I returned, the browser history had been wiped. I told myself I was overthinking. Tonight made it clear. I wasn't. The house, the tension, the off-balance seating chart, it all aligned. I wasn't being forgotten. I was being deleted. The lights dimmed. A microphone screeched to life. I took a breath, thinking the tributes were about to begin. Then I heard it. And now, a special tribute. Please welcome Imelda Fuhrman. I didn't move, because I hadn't written anything, because I wasn't supposed to be part of this story, because I knew. I was walking into something I hadn't agreed to. Applause flickered across the ballroom like a wave unsure of its destination. I stood slowly, unsure whether I was walking into a spotlight or a trap. Roxanne gave a polished nod from the front table, one hand lightly lifting her champagne flute. Tamsin smiled, but there was tension in the way her fingers gripped Clyde's arm. And Clyde? He couldn't even meet my eyes. I made my way to the stage with all the certainty of a woman being called into an ambush she couldn't yet define. A slideshow began to roll behind me. Childhood photos, Tamsin in ballet, Tamsin graduating, Tamsin on a trip to Barcelona. Voiceover followed. Roxanne's well-practiced tone. Tamsin has always been the light of our lives. Then Vernon. She's the anchor of our family. The kind of daughter any parent would be proud to claim. My name never surfaced. Even in group photos I remembered being in, I was cropped out or absent altogether. I stood still, smiling like a statue, holding back the heat building behind my eyes. Then Roxanne joined me on stage, her hand brushing my shoulder in that rehearsed way that looked tender but felt like pressure. She laughed into the mic. And what better way to celebrate this love than with a gift straight from the heart? I blinked, unsure what was coming next. Roxanne turned to the crowd. Imelda has something very special for the newlyweds. She's gifting them her beach house in Lauderdale by the sea. Gasps, a few surprised claps. Clyde finally looked at me, lips parted. Tamsin smiled wider, teeth flashing like knives. I stepped to the mic. This wasn't agreed on. The room stiffened. You could feel it shift. The moment where something posed as a joke turned into a public spectacle. Roxanne's smile barely faltered. Oh, sweetie, don't make a scene. It's just a house. Vernon stood at the front table, face flushed. You're embarrassing the family, Imelda. That's not how we raised you. He picked up a champagne flute, then, with a casual flick of his wrist, hurled it toward me. Glass struck just above my temple, not hard enough to knock me out, but sharp enough to draw blood and freeze the room in place. Phones went up. A woman near the side whispered, "Is she bleeding?" No one moved. I stood, dabbing the side of my head with the cloth napkin I'd folded just an hour ago. The stain spread in red. Tamsin stayed seated. Clyde tugged at his cuff, then glanced at the server like he needed a refill. I walked off the stage, every step punctuated by the click of my heels and the tightening pulse in my skull. A distant cousin I barely knew leaned in as I passed and muttered, "That was out of line." But no one followed me out. I stepped into the night alone. The breeze off the ocean bit at the side of my face, but I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone, called a rideshare, and sat on the curb. As I reached into my purse for my house key, I paused. It was gone. Juno didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door near midnight, still in my dress, dried blood crusting my hairline. She just opened the guest room, handed me a clean towel, and said, "Lock the door if you need to." I sat on the edge of the bed for an hour, not moving, not crying, just listening to the hum of her fridge and the soft groan of pipes behind the wall. My purse sat open beside me, lip balm, loose receipts, a protein bar I never finished. But the key? Gone. My fingers curled into the bedsheet. This wasn't just an outburst. That gift suggestion, the missing key? It all pointed to planning, premeditation. They weren't hoping I'd give the house. They were counting on taking it. 3 months back, at brunch after Clyde's promotion party, Tamsin had pulled me aside while Mom was distracted with mimosas. "You know," she'd said, placing a manicured hand on my wrist, "if I ever told Dad about that little app deal in 2018, he might wonder how clean your taxes are." I laughed it off, thought she was being petty. A week later, Clyde texted, "Hey, could you send me a digital copy of the beach house deed? Just want to show a realtor for wedding venue ideas?" I forwarded it without thinking. Trust, it turns out, makes a great disguise for a knife. Back in Juno's room, I opened my laptop and pulled up my banking portal. No strange withdrawals. Yet. Then I checked my email. There it was. Subject: Property Inspection Confirmation from Suncrest Realty Body. Per your co-owner, Vernon Cate's request, we're confirming your property inspection for tomorrow at 11 a.m. at your Lauderdale property. I froze. I never added Vernon as a co-owner. I bought that house solo after my last promotion. I paid every cent of the mortgage, alone, and yet, there his name was, typed cleanly into the paperwork. That was the moment the fog lifted. This wasn't an isolated act of cruelty, it was a campaign, and I'd slept through most of it. They thought I'd stay quiet, like always. They thought shame would paralyze me. They were wrong. By 10 a.m., I was standing on the sun-bleached porch of my beach house, keys jangling in my fist, waiting for the locksmith to finish his assessment. The salt air didn't feel like relief anymore. It felt like warning. He pointed near the door handle. "These scratches are fresh. See that? Whoever had a key didn't quite know how to use it." "Someone tried to get in," I muttered. He gave a short nod. "Not a break-in. A bad copy or an unfamiliar hand." I thanked him, handed him a tip, and waited until his truck turned the corner. Then I stepped inside, shut the door behind me, and locked it twice. The place looked untouched, but now, even that felt like a trick. I called Suncrest Realty. "Hi, this is Imelda Furman," I said. "I received a confirmation about a home inspection today. The name Vernon Cate is listed as co-owner." "Right," the agent chirped. That came through 2 weeks ago. The co-signature was attached digitally. You approved that via DocuSign, yes? No, I said flatly. I never signed anything, and Vernon Kate is not on my deed. There was silence on the other end. Oh, she said finally. Well, we do have a form with both names and signatures. Would you like me to forward it? Absolutely. Within 5 minutes, the forged document was sitting in my inbox. It was my full legal name, my fake signature, their real plan. Not even an hour later, a second email landed from an anonymous address. They've been planning this since October. You weren't supposed to find out. I read it 3 times, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my ears. October. 8 months of strategy, deceit, and soft coercion masked as small talk. My stomach turned. I opened my contacts and messaged Nathaniel, a colleague I trusted in corporate law. His response came within 10 minutes. This is serious. I don't handle family estate manipulation, but I'll connect you with Devlin Choate. He's your guy. I wrote down the name and number, fingers trembling, but not from fear, from readiness. I hadn't felt this in years. Clarity, control. I started building a timeline. Emails from Clyde asking for financial info. Tamsin's passive-aggressive brunch threats. Screenshots, bank statements, legal docs. Everything was evidence now. I even pulled her old sponsorship deals from LinkedIn to verify inconsistencies. Then I opened the family group chat. Typed a single sentence. You have 72 hours to undo what you've done. After that, I go public. I hit send, sat back, waited. 30 minutes passed. Then came the notification. You have been removed from the group. Not a word, not a call. I stared at the notification for a full minute. Removed. Just like that. No explanation, no attempt at grace or even guilt, just deletion. Again. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. It was time to stop reacting and start building. I created a folder. Asset Defense Imelda Furman. Inside it, I saved every screenshot, bank transfer, deed scan, message, and legal document I could find. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. An hour into cataloging, I logged into the old shared family banking platform. I used to monitor it when Mom had back surgery, paid bills, helped manage their retirement drawdown. The login failed. I tried again. Access denied. Contact account administrator. I blinked, then leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So they'd locked me out, even from the account I once used to bail them out of a foreclosure scare in 2016. This wasn't just about a beach house anymore. This was scorched earth. I picked up my phone and called the number Nathaniel had given me. Devlin Choate answered after 2 rings. His voice was calm, clipped, serious. I read the files your contact sent, he said. Miss Furman, what you're describing isn't just emotional abuse, it's financial entrapment, and it's actionable. For the first time in days, I exhaled without shaking. Then let's move, I said, because they already have. We scheduled a formal consultation for Friday morning. That afternoon, I mailed certified letters to both Vernon and Roxanne. I wrote them myself, every word purposeful and sharp. You have misrepresented private property. All current and future actions involving 917 Ocean Ridge will be reviewed through legal channels. Then I called the real estate office and froze the listing. Temporarily, but visibly. I didn't ask for a reply. I didn't want their version of one. Later that night, I scrolled through old text threads, stopping at one where Tamsin had sent me a photo of the family cabin, and wrote, I miss when we all got along. I laughed, quiet, bitter. That message was 2 weeks before her fiancé cornered me at brunch, asking if I had any deeds lying around he could glance over for venue ideas. Now it made sense. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a blueprint. Just after 9 p.m., Clyde texted me. You didn't have to go this far. We can still fix this. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Fix what? The theft or the assault? I didn't wait for a reply, but the next buzz came fast, and with something new. An anonymous number, a video link. At first I thought it was spam, but curiosity won. The footage loaded quickly, grainy night vision, time-stamped 2 nights ago. A figure outside my condo mailbox, pulling envelopes out, one by one, glancing over their shoulder. Tamsin, wearing a hoodie too small and a scowl too familiar. I hit pause and leaned back, letting the silence take shape. That grainy footage was proof, not of a crime maybe, but of intent. And sometimes that's worse. I forwarded the clip to Devlin with a brief note. Suspected trespassing, mailbox tampering. He called within minutes. We'll need a motion sensor camera and file for a temporary protection order. This is escalating. Escalating? No. It had already escalated. This was war now. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A friend from grad school had sent a link. This you? I tapped the screen. It was a video montage, stitched together from my toast at Tamsin's wedding, distorted to make me sound entitled, jealous, emotionally unstable. Choppy clips, all out of context. Overlaid text, raised with love, betrayed us anyway. The comment section was a mess. I knew she was the dramatic one. She always looked like trouble. And one from a former colleague. Wait, is this the same Imelda who ran that nonprofit program in Miami? Shame burned through me, but not for long. This wasn't embarrassment, it was defamation. I opened my laptop and dragged files into a Dropbox folder I'd already titled Receipts. There went the scanned deed, the bank transfers, screenshots of Clyde requesting venue info, audio from Mom begging me to help with the mortgage again just this one time. I posted the link with a single caption. This is what betrayal actually looks like. Then I turned off my phone. By morning, the response had shifted. A small wave of support began trickling in. Advocacy accounts reshared my post under hashtags like #FamilyGaslighting and #FinancialAbuse is real. I even saw someone I didn't know write, "She's not crazy, she's cornered." Tamsin tried to walk it back. Her comment, "I didn't know it would go this far," lasted barely 3 hours before it vanished, but screenshots live forever. Meanwhile, Devlin filed an emergency injunction against Vernon and began the paperwork to dispute the forged co-ownership. I packed slowly, box by box, not out of panic, but reclamation. This wasn't about leaving, it was about clearing space for what came next. That afternoon, my phone dinged again. Motion filed, eviction order, property, Boca Raton. They were trying to evict me from my own house. I looked at the screen and laughed. The next morning, I poured coffee just in time to hear a knock echo across the front porch of my parents' Boca Raton home. Except it wasn't my knock. It was the sheriff's, not a metaphor. A real uniformed officer hand-delivering the eviction papers I'd filed days ago. I wasn't there to see it, but Devlin had requested the deputy wear a body cam, just in case. Later, I watched the footage. Vernon opened the door in striped pajama pants, confused and squinting into the sun. Roxanne hovered behind him, arms folded, mouth tight. "You have 14 days to vacate the premises," the officer said. "This action is final unless legally contested." Vernon didn't yell. He didn't slam the door. He just stood there, paper in hand, as if he'd opened the wrong letter from a fortune cookie. That same afternoon, Tamsin went live on Instagram. Tears, fake lashes, and all. "She's ruining everything," she sniffled. "I lost sponsorships. My fiancé's under review. We're being kicked out of the house we grew up in." She turned the camera toward an old photo on the wall, me and her as kids. But this time, the public didn't buy it. Someone in the comments dropped court documents. The deed, the forged digital signature Clyde submitted, screenshots, receipts. It spread faster than her video did. By sunset, Clyde had been removed from the firm's new Miami project. Meanwhile, Devlin finalized everything. Ownership, fully confirmed mine. Co-ownership, never existed. All legal actions taken by Vernon, null, fraudulent, punishable. The story hit a local paper. Daughter accused of betrayal revealed as victim in family property scandal. My inbox filled with messages. Old co-workers, former clients, people who'd once looked the other way. "We never doubted you. I'm sorry we didn't say anything sooner. You deserved better than that, family." But I wasn't after validation. I was after truth. And this, all of it, was finally real. That evening, I reviewed the security cam footage from the moving company I'd hired to watch the Boca house. Vernon threw a box across the garage. Roxanne slammed a photo album shut, then dumped it in a trash bag like it had insulted her. Me? I kept one thing from the wedding, a paper swan napkin. It had survived the wine spill, the speech, the slap. Now it sat neatly on my desk, folded, clean. That night, as I made tea, the mail slot clinked. An envelope. Inside, a pastel card. Baby shower invitation, Tamsin's name. At the bottom, scrawled in ink like it was afraid to exist. I'm sorry, you deserved better. Tamsin. The morning after the baby shower card arrived, I drove down to Boca Raton one final time. The movers had cleared out days ago. The front gate hung open, the lawn overgrown, like even the house had stopped pretending. I unlocked the door. The silence inside was thick, not peaceful. No furniture, no framed photos. No smell of Sunday dinner or perfume clinging to hallway rugs. Just dust and stale air. I walked from room to room, checking off a mental list with every creak of the hardwood. Kitchen, empty, garage, cleared, bedrooms, bare. It was all mine again. Legally, technically, but emotionally, it felt like entering someone else's dream after they'd already woken up. In the kitchen, I found a note folded neatly on the counter. Typed, not handwritten. This was never your home anyway. I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened the dishwasher, not even sure why. Habit, maybe, or defiance. But inside, nestled between an old sponge and a warped cereal bowl, was a single shoebox. I pulled it out and opened it on the granite island. Inside, a napkin, one of those tacky swan folds from the wedding dinner, wine-stained at the edges. And underneath it, a photo. Me, age 12, holding a science fair ribbon, braces shining in the flash. Someone had written on the back, "You always ask too many questions." I didn't cry. Back at my condo, I placed both items on my desk. Not because they were sentimental, but because they were reminders. Evidence of survival, of clarity, of who I'd been long before this mess began. That afternoon, I called Devlin. "It's time," I told him. He didn't ask what I meant. We both knew. By end of day, he had initiated the sale of the Boca Raton house. No press release, no grand gesture, just a clean transaction, stripped of drama. Half the proceeds went straight into a fund for a shelter that supports women leaving abusive homes. The other half, mine, would go towards something new, something not tethered to shame. Later that evening, I lit a small candle in my living room. No scent, just flame, steady, quiet. I placed the wedding napkin in a glass frame beside it. On my laptop, I opened the baby shower invite again, scrolled, hovered over the RSVP, then closed the tab. Some things don't need a response. Just as I stood to clear my mug, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Bridget Old, team lead. Her message was short. "I saw everything. If you're ready to come back, we'd be lucky to have you." The next morning, I woke to stillness. Not the suffocating kind, just a quiet I didn't need to brace for. No unread messages blinking red, no missed calls, no threats masquerading as concern. I made tea, sat by the window, let it go cold while I watched the street come alive. There was no big moment of epiphany, just a small, grounded realization. It was over. Later that day, I pulled out the old storage bin I hadn't touched since the first wave of chaos began. I sorted through it slowly. The baptism photos, birthday cards signed in bulk ink, school certificates. None of it felt like mine anymore. I tossed most of it, keeping only the science fair snapshot and the wedding napkin, now in a frame. They weren't about nostalgia. They were proof. I'd lived. I'd outlived. That afternoon, I texted Bridget back. "Yes, I'm ready. But this time I do it on my terms." I meant it. The legal fallout lingered, even if the drama didn't. Vernon hadn't faced criminal charges, but the deed forgery stuck to his name like rust. His volunteer board quietly replaced him. A few friends stopped answering their door. Tamsin gave birth. No follow-up to the card, no calls. But every now and then I'd see her username pop up, liking a photo of my dog, a sunset, a quote about strength. Never anything personal, but not silence either. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I journaled that night, just one sentence. Some people break you, not out of hate, but because your strength reminds them of everything they gave up. I didn't hate them, not anymore. But I no longer needed their recognition either. That weekend, I walked by the beach again, the one near where I once imagined raising a family. I stood by the edge, toes in the sand, wind tangling my hair, and I smiled, not because the future looked exactly how I'd planned, but because it finally looked like mine. That evening, Juno invited me over for dinner. Her living room smelled like basil and something buttery. Two of her friends I hadn't met before were already there, wine glasses in hand. We talked about work, travel, politics. No one brought up family, no one needed to. Before dessert, Juno raised her glass. "To Imelda," she said, eyes locking with mine, "who sold the lie and bought back her life." The others clinked their glasses to mine, and for the first time in a very long while, I believed it. Sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come wrapped in family photos, inside phone calls that start with, "I'm just worried about you," and end with a favor that sounds like a demand. I used to think love meant tolerating things quietly, being the bigger person. But silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's surrender in disguise. What I've learned, painfully, is this. You are allowed to draw boundaries. You are allowed to say no, even to people who raised you. And you don't owe your peace of mind to those who profit from your silence. It's okay if your family isn't your safe place. It's okay if walking away is the healthiest thing you'll ever do. And if you're still in the middle of it, feeling like no one sees the truth, I hope this story reminds you, you are not alone. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose peace over people who shared your last name? How did you know when enough was enough? I want to hear your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this resonated with you. Or tell me where you're watching from. If this video didn't connect with you, I'd love to know why. What part didn't feel real? And hey, if you made it this far, maybe it's a sign. Hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next story, because sometimes healing doesn't start with justice. It starts with being heard. Thanks for listening.